Greetings, this is Top Hat and Buttered Popcorn. My name is John Savers. I'm your host, and today we're going to look at the recent film, The Aviator. This will be our second part, continuation of this film. It is, as you recall from our previous episode, a film directed by Martin Scorsese from a John Logan script, and it stars Leonardo DiCaprio, John C. Reilly, Kate Blanchett, and a host of fine support. Now, in this particular episode, we are going to pick up where the film kind of turns to a social side. Now, in discussing this particular film, I have, for my convenience, divided it into three parts. That is, that part which dealt with the filmmaking Howard Hughes, that part which dealt with the aviator Howard Hughes, and that part which dealt with the social playboy Howard Hughes. And today we will take a look at that social playboy Howard Hughes. So on that note, let's begin. In discussing the social side, so to speak, of Howard Hughes as depicted in the film The Aviator, we will, as in the last episode, touch upon the other main areas from time to time. It's hard to get them completely separated, as I'm attempting to do in this discussion. And also, because of the cuts back and forth and so forth, it's fairly easy to get the order of the social events a little bit jumbled. But at any rate, as best I recall, we have the initial Howard Hughes adult West Coast scene at which he is at a rather posh restaurant club. Many people are in tuxedos. There is a singer and band going on, dance floor available, I'm sure. And we do see Howard Hughes at table with Johnny Meyer. He is discussing, I think, generally his film and problems maybe a little bit, but the Johnny Meyer character spies a cigarette girl that he knows, and he calls over to her. He's not absolutely sure of the name, I think, and brings up a friend also whose name he's not absolutely sure. But this particular lass comes over, a brunette, pretty girl. She has her little cigarette container, which she has in front. Howard Hughes is interested in this particular young woman, and he begins to talk to her in a very sincere and earnest kind of way, initially asking her if she would smile for him, and he made a comment about her having a slightly thin upper lip, which made for a really nice smile. And then he asked her what could he do to really make her happy, to please her. And then he asked her if she would just let him touch her right there, apparently around the thigh. And he said, "Does this please you? Does this make you happy, so to speak?" Well, the woman is a little bit nonplussed. She's not really commenting. She's kind of getting across through facial expressions, smiles, and so forth, body language, as they said. And he finally gets her to acknowledge that she would be off in about a half hour, and he invites her to meet him, and he asks Johnny, you know, what room is where? It's 207, and he invites her to come up, and apparently she does. Well, by this episode, we get an idea of this film, which will be subsequently fully established, of Howard Hughes' eye for women thereafter. Hughes kind of goes back to Johnny Meyer, and he tells him, look, you told me, you're my agent, you told me that you understood the Hollywood scene, that you had plenty of contacts and so forth. You find me 2 cameras. Rent them, buy them, steal them if you have to, but you give me 2 cameras. In this, we have a slight flash of the ruthless side of Howard Hughes, and again, the sovereign side. It's not that he is above the law. It's more that he is the law. At any rate, he does make this clear, and presumably he did get the cameras. Now, the next significant social event involves the film, the big night, opening night of Hell's Angels. We touched upon this. He had discovered Jean Harlow and escorted her to the opening night of Hell's Angels. The woman who played this particular character, Jean Harlow, I thought left a little bit to be desired. In the previous episode, compared her to Madonna, who is a rather slight and sinewy lass who I don't think would make a good Jean Harlow. At any rate, this particular character promised or thanked Howard Hughes on the mic publicly for giving her a chance, and he apparently discovered more than Jean Harlow. Now, I think it is about this time that there was sort of an opening night shindig, and I believe that it is at this particular event that Howard Hughes first makes serious contact with Katharine Hepburn. He pursues her, invites her to play golf with him, and she accepts. Now, Cate Blanchett's rendering of Katharine Hepburn is most amusing. She does not have a spitting image of Katharine Hepburn, but she does have a prettiness within herself and a sense of glamour and style and so forth of being the movie star, and with a certain bit of comedy woven in, I think intentionally, of a sort of parodying of the public image of Katharine Hepburn. It made for a kind of a delightful character. Now, she also seems to have something of Katharine Hepburn's alleged athleticism. They do have their golf match, and they do have an amusing conversation along the way. She does seem to be a rather skillful golfer, and she, in talking to Howard, at one point says, I take 7 baths a day because, words to the effect, I sweat, damn it. So these sort of touches, no doubt, went over very big with a fellow such as Howard Hughes, who is, even at this time, bordering on obsessive in regard to cleanliness. It has not really come out fully, but we do have, about this point in time, a scene in which Howard Hughes is putting his hands on a stuffed chair, and it is a textile-covered chair. And he seems to feel something sticky and unpleasant, and he kind of looks at his fingers and rubs them together in a kind of horror at whatever it was that contaminated his fingers there. At any rate, this process will continue forward in more marked ways. Two, he invites her to go on a night flight, and he takes her up and lets her fly his plane. It's a nocturnal mission, and he offers her a little milk from a bottle, and they share that. Fly over, look at some of the homes of some of the moguls, such as Louis B. Mayer, and have a great good time. And she is just thrilled with it all and very pleased and happy about that. They land the craft and go back to Howard's place. She had already, at the very outset, when she had met Howard Hughes, and he had invited her, words to the effect, "Mr. Hughes, do your darndest." And while playing golf, she did make it known that she was sort of like his prey. And in this particular night, they do become a romantic item. And they become lovers, which extends over a number of years, apparently. This does not mean that Howard Hughes was exclusively devoted to Katharine Hepburn. He was also apparently interviewing starlets and so forth. We see some vignettes in regard to this. He apparently had a building almost in which he housed his starlets and wannabes and so forth. And it must have been something that he would have a hard time hiding from her. And I think she had a way of overlooking this because of a kind of family background that was unique and might it be considered mind-expanding for the times. At least it caused her perhaps to be a little bit more liberal than you might suppose. Another important social event occurred. We see Howard Hughes and Katharine Hepburn at another posh kind of restaurant. Again, most of the people seem to be in tuxedos. There is a band, lead singers and so forth, putting forth music of the time, and a lively crowd, and they seem to be having a very good time. They take their seat. Johnny Meyer is there, and Howard Hughes and Katharine order. So they're there chatting. It seems that Errol Flynn is also there. I think Jude Law played this particular character. But at any rate, he is a little bit intoxicated, feeling no pain, as they say. He comes forward and takes a seat at the table, not altogether a welcome, I believe, by Howard Hughes. He continues to babble along and so forth, according to the lively fashion of the times. The subject of the current movie of Howard Hughes comes up, or one that he is preparing to make, called Outlaw. It's a Western, and Errol Flynn kind of takes a dim view of this. Errol is, Flynn was of Jewish extraction, and I think that cowboys was not really his thing. He was a wonderfully gifted, athletic individual, well known for playing buccaneers and so forth, demonstrating his abilities. But I don't think he related much to the notion of cowboys. But Johnny Meyer kind of got his attention by saying it's about sex, 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 sex. Well, Errol begins to grin from ear to ear about this news, and he is from time to time making some comments to Catherine also, and to Howard. Howard is pretty much quiet in his presence, only making curt responses when forced to. Their plates are presented to them by the waiter. We see that Howard Hughes has apparently ordered a sirloin steak, well done. Right adjacent to the steak on the plate are 12 well-spaced peas in rank and file. The lively, bantering Errol Flynn gets up and with his fingers grabs one of the peas and pops it in his mouth. There is this look of kind of horror and indignation on the part of DiCaprio depicting Howard Hughes' reaction. We see Katharine Hepburn looking over at Howard. She seems to perceive a little bit of what may be in his mind at this time. On the night of their romantic interlude, or one of the nights thereafter, they did have a kind of colloquy in which they shared some intimate areas of their thinking. And Katharine Hepburn had told Howard, be careful. You and I, we're not like other people. We have to be very careful of how we act in public and present ourselves because, you know, the camera people, the media, they're just there ready to tear you apart. And she alludes to her brother who committed suicide and how these camera folks attended the funeral to flash the cameras and whatnot, and to try to exploit and sensationalize this sad event. Howard listens. It's a caution for him because, of course, he is, as a sovereign figure, not prone to quell before public or private interests, but to do what he wished to do. But he does share this much with Catherine in kind of response, and that is that he said, you know, sometimes I think that I'm kind of like maybe losing my mind a little bit, something. Sometimes I see things that may not be there. So she looks at him in that way. So I think they bonded quite a lot during these early days. And there's something about him which may have stirred maternal instincts in Katharine Hepburn to boot. Given the preamble to this particular film and the presentation of Howard Hughes' mother, it may well be that he was always something of a sucker for a maternal woman, or a woman who could flash that. But at any rate, he is at the table. His plate has been invaded by Errol Flynn, and he is, to say the least, disgusted and horrified at this. He tries to cut his steak to take a bite in a kind of a will to get over the unclean invasion of his plate, but he just couldn't do it. and he sets down his flatware, and you sense that he's really hungry, but he just can't overcome this phobic inhibitor in him now. So he says, well, we're going to have to leave. He makes a very brief, curt farewell, adieu. He and Catherine leave, and they had hardly started to walk out of the place that someone threw something or other at Errol Flynn, and before you know it, a brawl has broken out in this posh place. So we do have Catherine and Howard and Item fairly bonded, so much so that Catherine has him join her to go and meet the family, which is, I take it, in Connecticut, New England at any rate. And they do appear on the scene in a vehicle. The house is a rather large abode set back on an ample piece of yard. And as they drive up, they see a gaggle of people frolicking, so to speak, up front. It may well have a certain resonance with those individuals who are slightly cracked in mental institutions, considered harmless and allowed to frolic in the yard of the institution. The car is parked. Catherine, a skilled actress and member of the family, gets out and goes forward, hallooing her family, greeting, being welcomed back, and so forth. Howard is a little bit diffident. He is sort of lingering back with the luggage near the car. The family dog races forward, and before Howard Hughes could hardly put down the luggage, it has two paws, front paws, on the top part of his pants, making mud prints, and of course the dog is wagging tongue and sniffing and so forth. There is a look of distress on the face of Howard Hughes, pretty well understandable. By now we have seen him at restaurants going to men's room and scrubbing his hands, trying to get them clean. We are well aware now that a kind of obsession has manifested itself in regard to cleanliness. It all seems to resonate very well with that preamble in which his mother says, "You are not safe." At any rate, he does seem to be able to get past the dog, to go forward to shake hands and greet the family proper. Later, they sit at the table. Howard Hughes is a commanding sort of person, a brilliant fellow, a visionary, and here he is sitting amongst dilettantes and poseurs, and it must have been difficult. Katharine Hepburn sometimes flashes a sympathetic look, but she is, after all, within her family, and it's expected, as she mentions herself, to behave in a certain way. Now, the mother, particularly, is one of these people who fires questions as if they were projectiles, and then almost immediately either supplies an answer or makes a reply as if there is a assumed answer, and everybody knows what the assumed answer is, so she then makes a reply to that answer. So it's very annoying, tedious kind of people to be around. They are always interrupting, and whenever Howard Hughes begins to talk about something which is important to him, he is interrupted by something trivial and banal. So there you have it. He finally has all he can stand. He stands up and he makes the point that they are socialist and don't care about money because they've always had money. They have no sympathy for legitimate working people. Now, this being so, events at this particular dinner were closed. Howard Hughes firmly excuses himself and departs. Now, this may have been, in some ways, a demarcation line in the relationship of Howard Hughes and Katharine Hepburn, but they continue for a while at least. We see them at another party in which Katharine Hepburn spies Louis B. Mayer and drifts over to say hello. And now, about this time, Ava Gardner, played, as best I can recall, by a lass named Kate Beckinsale. But anyway, she comes by and sort of whispers at DiCaprio's Hughes, she's just taking care of business, Howard. Out of time again. This is Top Hat and Buttered Popcorn.